Sir, you need to move to the back. This section is for our premium passengers only. The flight attendant's voice carried across the cabin as cameras started rolling. Donovan Reed looked up from his phone, his expression unchanged. He wore faded jeans, a gray hoodie, and carried a worn leather briefcase. Nothing about him screamed wealth or power. To everyone watching, he was just another passenger being told he didn't belong. The woman standing over him, Elise Harlan, tapped her tablet impatiently. "Sir, did you hear me? You're in the wrong section." Donovan held up his boarding pass. "Seat 1A, first class." Elise's eyes narrowed. "That has to be a mistake. Let me see your ID." Around them, 12 passengers had their phones out. Twitter user at Skywatcher was already live tweeting the confrontation. Have you ever watched someone's entire world change in a single stretch of time? Because these real-life stories and black stories show how touching stories can become life stories that reshape entire industries. The departure board above the gate flashed red. Flight 447 to Chicago. Boarding complete soon. Elise examined Donovan's boarding pass like it was counterfeit currency. Her colleague, Sophie Lang, approached from the galley. "Problem?" Sophie whispered loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "This gentleman seems confused about his seat assignment," Elise replied. Her tone suggested Donovan was either lying or incompetent. Donovan remained seated, buckled in, briefcase at his feet. "Ma'am, I understand there might be confusion. Could you please check your system?" Elise's fingers flew across the tablet. She frowned, tapped it again, then shook her head. "Sir, our records show you purchased an economy ticket. You'll need to move to your correct seat in coach." "That's incorrect," Donovan said quietly. He pulled out his phone and showed her his mobile boarding pass. "First class seat 1A, paid for weeks ago." An elderly white man in seat 2A leaned forward. "Son, maybe you should just take your real seat. No need to cause trouble." Elise nodded approvingly. "Exactly, sir. Are you sure you didn't mean to book coach? These mistakes happen when people aren't familiar with the booking process." The condescension hung in the air like smoke. Donovan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He reached into his briefcase and retrieved a platinum airline status card, placing it on the tray table. 340,000 miles flown with Atlantic Airways, he said. Platinum status for 6 consecutive years. Elise barely glanced at it. "Anyone can get those cards online now. Sir, I'm going to need you to gather your belongings and move to your assigned seat." At Skywatcher's fingers moved rapidly across her phone screen. Live black passenger being systematically humiliated on Atlantic Airways Flight 447. This is insane Atlantic discrimination. The tweet was retweeted dozens of times in moments. Captain Victor Langley emerged from the cockpit. He commanded respect through presence alone. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his uniform pressed to military precision. "What's the situation?" he asked Elise, not looking at Donovan. "Passenger in the wrong seat won't move to coach where he belongs." Langley sized up Donovan with a glance. Hoodie, jeans, sneakers. His assessment was immediate and wrong. "Sir, you're holding up departure. I need you to take your correct seat immediately." Donovan looked up calmly. "Captain, I'm in my correct seat. First class 1A. Here's my boarding pass, my ID, and my frequent flyer card." Langley didn't look at any of them. "Son, I've been flying for years. I know when someone's trying to scam an upgrade. Elise, call ground security." The passengers in first class shifted uncomfortably. A woman in 3B started recording with her phone. A businessman in 4A looked up from his laptop, frowning. Donovan pulled out his phone and began recording. "For the record, I'm being asked to leave my paid first-class seat despite having proper documentation." "Sir, put that phone away," Langley commanded. "You're being disruptive." I'm documenting discrimination, Donovan replied evenly. Elise was already on her radio. Ground control, we need security at the gate. Passenger refusing to comply with crew instructions. The man in 2A shook his head. Just move to coach, buddy. You're making this harder than it needs to be. But the woman in 3B spoke up. Wait, he showed you his boarding pass. Why aren't you checking it? Elise's face reddened. Ma'am, please don't interfere. This gentleman clearly purchased an economy ticket and is trying to get a free upgrade. How do you know that? The woman pressed. Experience, Elise replied curtly. Donovan made a phone call. The conversation was brief, his voice low. Yeah, I'm running late. Start without me. I'll handle this personally. Langley overheard. Handle what, sir? Who are you calling? Donovan didn't answer. He was taking notes on his phone, documenting every word, every action. At Skywatcher's follower count jumped as her live stream gained traction. Comments flooded in. This is how this is still happening. Sue them. Record everything. The gate agent's voice echoed through the terminal. Final boarding call for Flight 447 to Chicago. All remaining passengers, please board immediately. 2 security officers approached. Rafael Torres, a longtime veteran, and Maya Chen. What's the problem? Torres asked. Langley pointed at Donovan. Passenger in wrong seat, refusing to move, being disruptive. Torres looked at the scene. A well-dressed man sitting calmly in first class, surrounded by crew members and passengers with phones out. Sir, can I see your boarding pass? Donovan handed it over without protest. Torres examined it carefully, compared it to Donovan's ID, then looked at his radio. This shows first-class seat 1A, Torres said to Langley. It's clearly fraudulent, Elise interjected. He's trying to scam an upgrade. Torres looked at her skeptically. Ma'am, these boarding passes come directly from your system. How would it be fraudulent? Elise faltered. Well, these people know how to manipulate the system. The words hung in the air. Even passengers who hadn't been paying attention looked up. These people wasn't subtle. Donovan remained perfectly still, but his eyes met Torres. The security officer had heard those words before, understood their meaning. Sir, Torres said to Donovan, would you mind stepping off the aircraft for a moment, just to verify everything with the gate agent? It was a reasonable request, delivered respectfully. Donovan nodded and stood. As he gathered his briefcase, his phone buzzed. A text message flashed briefly on the screen before he closed it. The woman in 3B caught a glimpse. Board meeting moved to conference room A, emergency session. She frowned, wondering what kind of emergency board meeting a coach passenger would know about. The departure board now showed Flight 447 delayed. Ground Supervisor Nadia Brooks arrived at the gate with purposeful strides. She'd been with Atlantic Airways for years, worked her way up from baggage handler to supervisor. She prided herself on handling difficult situations. What's the holdup? She asked Torres. Passenger verification, he replied, handing her Donovan's documents. Nadia examined everything with theatrical thoroughness. Boarding pass, ID, frequent flyer card. She looked from the documents to Donovan, then back to the documents. Mr. Reed, these appear to be in order. However, given the crew's concerns about your behavior, I think it's best if we reseat you in coach for this flight. Donovan's voice remained level. What behavior? I was sitting quietly in my assigned seat. You were being argumentative with the flight crew. I was providing documentation when they claimed I was in the wrong seat. Nadia's expression hardened. Sir, arguing with me won't help your cause. You can take your assigned coach seat, or you can take the next flight. Those are your options. Back on the plane, at Skywatcher's live stream had exploded. The hashtag Atlantic Airways discrimination was trending. Her viewer count climbed steadily. Her commentary was running live. They forced him off the plane now. This man has a first-class ticket, showed multiple forms of ID, and they're treating him like a criminal. This is what discrimination looks like. Comments poured in faster than she could read them. Save this video as evidence. What's his name? He needs a lawyer. Atlantic Airways stock is going to tank. Someone find out who this guy is. Inside the terminal, other passengers from the flight had gathered to watch. Several were recording. A teenage girl was streaming on TikTok. A businessman was updating his LinkedIn feed. Donovan looked at his watch. A habit, perhaps, but Nadia noticed it was expensive. Very expensive. More than her monthly salary expensive. "Sir, I need your decision. Coach seat or next flight?" "May I speak with your district manager?" Donovan asked. Nadia laughed. "The district manager? Sir, I'm the senior supervisor on duty." "I have full authority here. I understand your position," Donovan replied. "However, I'd like to escalate this to your district manager. You can file a complaint online like everyone else." Several first-class passengers had come out to watch. The woman from 3B, now identified as Dr. Aisha Rahman, stepped forward. "Excuse me, but I was on that plane." This man was sitting quietly in his seat. He showed his boarding pass, his ID, everything. Why exactly is he being removed? Nadia turned to her. "Ma'am, this is between us and Mr. Reed. Please return to your seat." "I'm a paying customer too," Dr. Rahman replied, "and I'm witnessing what appears to be discrimination." A businessman from first class joined her. "I saw the whole thing. The flight attendant never checked his documents properly. She just assumed he was in the wrong seat." Nadia felt the situation slipping away from her. More passengers were gathering. Phones were everywhere. She needed to reassert control. "Sir," she said to Donovan, "you can take the coach seat I'm offering, or you can leave the airport. Those are your only options." Donovan pulled out his phone and made another call. This one lasted nearly a minute. His voice was too low for most people to hear, but Dr. Rahman was close enough to catch fragments. "Urgency. Board meeting. Conference room A. Now." Dr. Rahman frowned. "Board meeting?" Donovan ended the call and addressed the gathered crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this delay. I know you all want to get to Chicago on time." His tone was different now, more authoritative. Several passengers noticed the change. Nadia sensed something shifting. "Sir, who are you calling?" "My office," Donovan replied simply. "Your office?" Donovan reached into his briefcase and withdrew a business card holder. He selected one card and handed it to Nadia. She read it, and her face went pale. "Donovan Reed, Chief Executive Officer, Reed Enterprises." The gathered passengers pressed closer, trying to see. Dr. Rahman read over Nadia's shoulder and gasped. "My God," she whispered. The businessman from first class pulled out his phone and started Googling. His eyes widened as he read. "Holy shit," he muttered. "Reed Enterprises? They're worth billions." At Skywatcher caught the exchange on her live stream. Wait, did someone just say billions? Chat, what's happening? Who is Reed Enterprises?" Her viewers were already researching. Reed Enterprises just announced massive revenue. They own hundreds of companies. This guy isn't just some random passenger. Atlantic Airways is about to get sued into oblivion. Nadia stared at the business card. Her hands were shaking slightly. "Mr. Reed, this doesn't change anything. You were being disruptive." But her voice lacked conviction now. Donovan looked at his watch again. "In a moment, you're going to receive a call from your headquarters. I suggest you answer it." "What kind of call?" "The kind that comes from your board of directors." The crowd had grown. Airport security was trying to manage the situation, but the live streams were multiplying. Atlantic Airways discrimination had thousands of tweets now. Captain Langley appeared looking flustered. "What's going on out here? We need to depart." Torres filled him in quietly. Langley's expression changed as he listened. "CEO of what?" Langley asked. "Reed Enterprises," Torres replied. "Major corporation. Billions in revenue." Langley looked at Donovan with new eyes. The hoodie and jeans didn't look so casual anymore. They looked like the outfit of someone who didn't need to impress anyone. Nadia's radio crackled. "Supervisor Brooks, please contact headquarters immediately. Priority 1. She looked at Donovan, who checked his watch again. "Right on schedule," he said quietly. Dr. Rahman stepped closer to Donovan. "Sir, I'm sorry this happened to you. This is completely unacceptable." "Thank you," Donovan replied. "But this isn't about me anymore." "What do you mean?" Donovan looked around at the crowd, at the phones recording everything, at the airport security trying to manage a situation that had grown beyond their control. This is about making sure it doesn't happen to anyone else. As at Skywatcher's livestream, viewer count climbed, major news outlets were starting to pick up the story. Atlantic Airways' stock price, which had been stable, dropped. Nadia's radio crackled again. "Supervisor Brooks, CEO Lillian Harper needs to speak with you immediately." Nadia looked at Donovan, then at the business card in her hand, then at the crowd of witnesses recording everything. "This is about to get very interesting," Dr. Rahman muttered to the businessman beside her. Donovan opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. Inside were documents that would change everything. "Actually," he said to Nadia, "there's something else you should know." The crowd leaned in, sensing that whatever came next would be the moment everything changed. Donovan's phone buzzed with a text. "Board is assembled awaiting your call." He looked up at Nadia, at Captain Langley, at Elise, who had joined them from the plane. "Shall we discuss this inside? I think you're going to want privacy for this conversation." The gate area had transformed into an impromptu amphitheater. Passengers sat on chairs, stood against windows, and leaned against pillars. The live streams had multiplied. At Skywatcher now had thousands of viewers. Other passengers were streaming simultaneously. Donovan stood calmly in the center, his briefcase open, documents arranged methodically on a nearby chair. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying easily across the space. "I want to apologize for the delay. I know many of you have connections to make, families to see, business to conduct." Nadia Brooks stood frozen. Lillian Harper's direct number displayed on her phone screen. She hadn't made the call yet. "Before we resolve this situation," Donovan continued, "I think everyone deserves to understand what's really happening here." He pulled out a leather portfolio and opened it. The first document was a stock ownership certificate. Reed Enterprises acquired a 23% stake in Atlantic Airways. The words hit the crowd like a physical force. Gasps, muttered curses, someone saying, "No way," loud enough for everyone to hear. Captain Langley stepped forward. "That's impossible. I would have heard about a major acquisition like that." Donovan looked at him calmly. "Captain Langley, you've been with Atlantic Airways for years. Excellent safety record, by the way. I've reviewed your file." Langley's face went white. "You've reviewed my file?" Reed Enterprises reviews all key personnel files for companies in our investment portfolio. Standard due diligence. Elise Harlan, who had been lurking at the edge of the crowd, suddenly understood the magnitude of what had just happened. She had discriminated against someone who effectively owned nearly a quarter of the airline. Dr. Rahman was recording with her phone, but she lowered it slightly. "Mr. Reed, are you saying you own part of Atlantic Airways? 23%? Donovan confirmed. "Which makes Reed Enterprises the second largest shareholder." He pulled out another document. Atlantic Airways fiscal year, total revenue, billions. Reed Enterprises investment, nearly $2 billion. The businessman from first class was frantically taking notes. "This is incredible. This guy isn't just wealthy, he's one of the owners of the airline." At Skywatcher's stream was exploding with comments. "He owns the airline. This is the best plot twist ever. Atlantic Airways is so screwed. Someone's getting fired in real time." Donovan reached into his briefcase again. "There's more context you should have." He produced a thick folder labeled Atlantic Airways Corporate Account Summary. "Read Enterprises books, hundreds of flights per year with Atlantic Airways. Our annual travel expenditure with this airline, over $1 million. Nadia finally found her voice. "Mr. Reed, I had no idea." "Of course you didn't," Donovan interrupted gently. "That's the point. A customer's treatment shouldn't depend on their net worth or their position. It should be consistent and respectful." He opened the folder and pulled out several pages. "My personal account with Atlantic Airways. Platinum status for 6 consecutive years. 340,000 miles flown. Last year alone, I took dozens of flights with this airline." Captain Langley was staring at the documents like they might disappear if he blinked. "Sir, we had no way of knowing." "Captain, that's exactly the problem," Donovan replied. You made assumptions based on my appearance. You never checked my credentials. You called security without verifying the facts." Elise's voice was barely a whisper. "Mr. Reed, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize." "Harlan," Donovan said, consulting a document. "Years with Atlantic Airways. Generally positive performance reviews. 2 customer complaints in your file, both involving passengers of color." The implication hung in the air like a blade. Dr. Rahman stepped closer. "Mr. Reed, what happens now?" Donovan looked at his watch. "In a moment, Nadia's going to get another call from headquarters. Because right now, there's an emergency board meeting happening in Atlantic Airways, Chicago." As if on cue, Nadia's phone rang. The caller ID showed Lillian Harper, CEO. Donovan nodded to her. "You should take that. Put it on speaker." Nadia's hands were shaking as she answered. "Ms. Harper?" "Nadia, is Donovan Reed with you?" The CEO's voice was tense. "Yes, ma'am. Put him on the phone now." Donovan stepped forward. "Hello, Lillian." "Donovan, I just got out of an emergency board meeting. What the hell is happening at the gate?" The crowd pressed closer. This was better than any movie. "Lillian, I'm on flight 447 to Chicago. I was denied service and removed from my paid first-class seat due to what I can only characterize as racial discrimination." Silence on the other end of the call. Then, "Please tell me you're joking." "I'm afraid not. The incident has been live-streamed by multiple passengers. It's trending on social media. Your stock is down." "Jesus Christ." Donovan pulled out his phone and showed the screen to the crowd. Multiple social media feeds were visible, all showing the hashtag Atlantic Airways discrimination trending. "Lillian, are you familiar with Section 12.3 of our shareholder agreement?" Another pause. "The material incident clause, correct? Discrimination against passengers constitutes a material incident that triggers a governance review." Dr. Rahman whispered to the businessman. "He's not just complaining, he's activating legal procedures." "Donovan," Lillian's voice came through the speaker. "What do you need?" "First, I need your flight crew to understand that they've created a significant legal and public relations crisis for Atlantic Airways." Captain Langley was staring at the phone like it might explode. "Second, I need immediate corrective action that demonstrates Atlantic Airways' commitment to equal treatment of all passengers. Whatever you need." Donovan looked around the crowd at the phone still recording, at Nadia's pale face, at Elise, who looked like she might faint. "And third, Lillian, I need you to understand that this isn't about me. It's about the thousands of passengers who experience discrimination every year. but don't have the resources or platform to fight back. The crowd was silent now. Even the live stream comments had slowed as people absorbed what they were witnessing. "Donovan, I'm authorizing whatever actions you deem appropriate. Full authority." Donovan nodded. "Thank you. I'll have recommendations soon." He ended the call and looked around the gate area. Dozens of people were staring at him. Multiple live streams were broadcasting to thousands more. "There's one more thing you should know," Donovan said. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a final document. This one was different, more official-looking with multiple signatures and seals. Atlantic Airways received an anonymous donation of $500,000 to fund diversity and inclusion training. He held up the document. "The donation came from the Reed Foundation, my foundation." The revelation hit like a thunderclap. Elise actually gasped out loud. "I've been trying to help this airline improve its culture for over a year," Donovan continued. "Today, I experienced firsthand why that help is desperately needed." At Skywatcher's voice came through her live stream. "Chat, are you getting this? This man has been trying to help the airline, and they discriminated against him. This is unreal." Donovan closed his briefcase with deliberate precision. "Now, shall we discuss how to ensure this never happens again?" Nadia's phone rang again. This time, it was the Atlantic Airways legal department. The real work was about to begin. Conference Room A at Atlantic Airways headquarters was normally used for quarterly reviews and budget meetings. Today, it had become the epicenter of a corporate crisis. Lillian Harper sat at the head of the mahogany table surrounded by board members, the company's legal team, and her senior vice presidents. The room's video wall displayed 3 feeds: the live stream from the gate, Atlantic Airways stock chart showing a steady decline, and a Twitter analytics dashboard tracking Atlantic Airways discrimination. "Patch Mr. Reed through to the main screen," Lillian ordered. Donovan appeared on the large display, standing calmly in the gate area, with Nadia Brooks beside him. The crowd of passengers was still gathered, phones still recording. "Donovan, you have the floor," Lillian said. Donovan had positioned himself so the crowd could hear both sides of the conversation. This wasn't going to be a private settlement discussion. This was going to be transparency in real time. "Thank you, Lillian. Before we discuss solutions, I think the board needs to understand the full scope of what happened here." He gestured to Elise Harlan, who had reluctantly joined the group at the gate podium. "Ms. Harlan, would you please tell the board what you said when you first approached me?" Elise's voice was barely audible. "I told you that section was for premium passengers only, despite the fact that I was holding a first-class boarding pass." "Yes. And when I showed you my platinum frequent flyer card, I said anyone could get those cards online." Board member Theo Kim leaned forward in Chicago. "Ms. Harlan, what made you assume Mr. Reed's documents were fraudulent?" The question hung in the air. Elise looked around desperately, seeking an escape from a truth everyone already knew. Donovan answered for her. "I'll save Ms. Harlan the discomfort of answering. She made assumptions based on my appearance. A black man in casual clothes couldn't possibly belong in first class." Lillian rubbed her temples. "Donovan, what are your immediate demands?" "Let me present the facts first. Then we'll discuss solutions." Donovan pulled out his tablet and connected it to his phone's hotspot. Within seconds, he was sharing his screen with the conference room. "Atlantic Airways financial performance. Total passengers tens of millions. Customer satisfaction rating below industry average." The board members were taking notes furiously. Discrimination complaints filed with the Department of Transportation against Atlantic Airways, significantly higher than the industry average. Lillian's face was grim. "Donovan, we weren't aware the numbers were that high." Because your complaint resolution system is designed to discourage reporting, not encourage it. Donovan pulled up another slide. Reed Enterprises' annual travel spending breakdown. Atlantic Airways over $1 million. American Airlines, hundreds of thousands. Delta, hundreds of thousands. The implications were clear. Atlantic Airways was getting the largest share of a multi-million-dollar corporate travel budget. However, Donovan continued, given today's incident, Reed Enterprises will be reviewing all vendor relationships for alignment with our corporate values. Board member Priya Walsh spoke up. Mr. Reed, what would constitute appropriate resolution from your perspective? Donovan looked around the gate area at the passengers still watching, at the live streams still broadcasting. First, immediate termination of all personnel involved in the discriminatory actions. Elise Harlan's knees buckled slightly. Captain Langley closed his eyes. Second, implementation of comprehensive bias training for all customer-facing staff soon. Lillian nodded. Agreed. Third, establishment of an anonymous reporting system for discrimination incidents managed by a third-party organization. Also agreed. Fourth, creation of a $500,000 fund dedicated to diversity and inclusion initiatives. The board members exchanged glances. $500,000 was significant, but not catastrophic. And fifth, Donovan continued, a public apology from Atlantic Airways acknowledging systemic failures in equal treatment of passengers. Lillian paused. Donovan, a public apology could expose us to significant legal liability. Lillian, your current legal liability is already significant. There are thousands of people watching this conversation live. Your stock has dropped. Your choice is between controlled transparency and uncontrolled crisis. Legal counsel whispered something in Lillian's ear. She nodded grimly. Our conditions accepted, she announced. The crowd at the gate erupted in applause. At Skywatcher's comment section exploded with celebration emojis. But Donovan wasn't finished. There's one additional requirement, he said. The conference room fell silent. I want real-time implementation, not promises, not future commitments. Changes implemented quickly. That's impossible, protested VP of Operations Quentin Torres. Union agreements, legal reviews, system updates. Donovan interrupted. Quentin, I've reviewed your operational capabilities. When weather emergencies require rapid schedule changes, you can reorganize your entire system in hours. When you have the will, you have the way. Lillian leaned back in her chair. What specifically do you need soon? Donovan pulled up another document on his tablet. Ms. Harlan and Captain Langley, terminated quickly. Replacement training materials developed and deployed soon. Anonymous reporting system operational soon. And if we can't meet that timeline, Donovan looked directly into the camera, then Reed Enterprise will divest our Atlantic Airways holdings and recommend that our network of partner companies do the same. The threat was devastating. Reed Enterprises wasn't just a large investor. They were connected to dozens of other corporations that collectively represented millions in annual travel spending. Board member Priya Walsh asked, Mr. Reed, how do we know these changes will be sufficient? You don't, Donovan replied, but you'll have quarterly reviews with independent auditors to track progress. Full transparency, public reporting. Lillian looked around the conference room. Her board members were nodding. The legal team was scribbling notes frantically. The stock price continued its decline. Donovan, we accept all conditions. The crowd at the gate erupted again. Several passengers were wiping away tears. Dr. Rahman was shaking her head in amazement, but Donovan still wasn't done. There's one final element, he said. Personal accountability. Lillian's expression tightened. What do you mean? Executive compensation should be tied to diversity and inclusion. Inclusion metrics, starting with your compensation. Lillian. The conference room went dead silent. 20% of executive bonuses tied to measurable improvements in equal treatment outcomes. Quarterly assessments. Public reporting. Lillian stared at the screen for a long moment. Around the conference table, board members waited for her response. "Agreed," she said finally. Donovan nodded. "Then we have a framework for moving forward." He looked around the gate area one more time. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize again for the delay. However, I hope you can see that sometimes delays serve a greater purpose." The crowd broke into sustained applause. Nadia Brooks stepped forward. "Mr. Reed, what happens now?" Donovan smiled for the first time since the incident began. "Now, Nadia, we fix the system, and we make sure every passenger is treated with dignity and respect." He looked back at the camera. "Lillian, I'll expect the implementation timeline by email soon." "You'll have it quickly," she replied. Donovan closed his tablet and picked up his briefcase. "Now, I believe Flight 447 was supposed to depart earlier. Shall we get these passengers to Chicago?" The transformation was immediate. Nadia was issuing instructions to her staff. Elise Harlan was being escorted away by airport security. Captain Langley was having his credentials reviewed by supervisors. A new flight crew was already being assembled. At Skywatcher addressed her live stream audience. "Chat, I don't think I've ever seen anything like this. One man just changed an entire airline's policies in real time." As Donovan finally boarded his flight in seat 1A, first class, Dr. Rahman leaned over from 3B. "Mr. Reed, that was incredible. How did you stay so calm through all of that?" Donovan settled into his seat and opened his laptop. "Dr. Rahman, anger is temporary. System change is permanent. I'd rather build something lasting than just vent frustration." The plane pushed back from the gate, delayed, but it was carrying more than passengers to Chicago. It was carrying the promise of change. Donovan Reed sat in his Chicago office reviewing implementation reports from Atlantic Airways. His assistant Vivian Hale had arranged the documents chronologically on his mahogany desk. The termination letters were executed. Elise Harlan and Captain Langley were dismissed with cause. Nadia Brooks was demoted to training coordinator and will undergo mandatory sensitivity counseling. Donovan nodded, reviewing the documentation. "What about the replacement protocols?" "New crew training materials went live. Every Atlantic Airways employee will complete hours of bias recognition training soon. The anonymous reporting system launched." His phone buzzed with a news alert. "Atlantic Airways stock rebounds after swift discrimination response. Shares up." The market had responded positively to decisive action. Investors appreciated companies that addressed problems quickly rather than letting them fester. Lillian Harper had appeared on CNBC announcing the Dignity in the Skies initiative. The interview had been watched hundreds of thousands of times. "Mr. Reed's experience was unacceptable," she had said directly to the camera. But his response showed us how to turn a failure into an opportunity for meaningful change. The anonymous reporting system had already logged its first complaint. A passenger reporting discriminatory treatment by ground staff. The complaint was being investigated by a third-party firm within hours, not weeks. Donovan's computer chimed with an incoming video call. Lillian Harper appeared on screen, looking considerably more relaxed. "Donovan, I wanted to give you the first quarterly report personally." She shared her screen showing a comprehensive dashboard of metrics. Discrimination complaints down significantly. Customer satisfaction surveys show marked improvement. Most importantly, we've had employees proactively report bias incidents they've witnessed. Donovan leaned back in his chair. "That's the real victory, Lillian, when employees feel empowered to speak up." "The training program has been requested by other airlines. We're licensing it through a non-profit organization with proceeds funding diversity scholarships." "Excellent. What about the executive compensation metrics?" Lillian smiled. Board approved unanimously. 20% of all C-suite bonuses now tied to diversity and inclusion outcomes. First quarterly review soon. Donovan pulled up his own metrics dashboard. Reed Enterprises tracked their vendor relationships meticulously. Atlantic Airways is back to being our preferred airline partner, he confirmed. Reed Enterprises will increase our travel spending this quarter. That's wonderful news. Donovan, I have to ask, how did you know exactly what levers to pull? Donovan considered the question. Lillian, I've been discriminated against before, but I've also been in boardrooms for years. I understand how corporations make decisions. The key is aligning moral imperatives with business incentives. The whole incident has become a Harvard Business School case study, Lillian mentioned. They're calling it stakeholder activism in real time. After ending the call, Donovan walked to his office window overlooking Lake Michigan. The view reminded him why he loved Chicago, a city built by immigrants and outsiders who refuse to accept limitations. His phone rang. Dr. Aisha Rahman from the flight. Mr. Reed, I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from your foundation's website. Not at all, Dr. Rahman. How can I help you? I wanted to tell you that what you did inspired me to take action in my own workplace, Dr. Rahman said. I'm head of emergency medicine at Northwestern Memorial. We've had our own issues with bias in patient treatment. I presented your Atlantic Airways case to our board. Donovan smiled. What was their response? We're implementing a similar anonymous reporting system for bias incidents, and we're requiring all staff to complete unconscious bias training. Your approach using data and systematic change rather than individual blame, it really resonated. That's exactly what needs to happen, Donovan replied. One incident becomes a catalyst for broader change. The medical community is calling it the Reed Protocol, using documented discrimination incidents to drive institutional reform rather than just individual punishment. After Dr. Rahman hung up, Donovan reviewed the broader impact metrics his team had compiled. The hashtag #DignityInSkies had been used tens of thousands of times across social media platforms. But more importantly, it had spawned copycat initiatives at other transportation companies. Greyhound bus lines had announced their own bias training program. Amtrak had hired a chief diversity officer. Major hotel chains had implemented anonymous reporting systems. His assistant brought in a stack of letters from passengers who had experienced similar discrimination. Each letter shared a story, thanked Donovan for speaking up, and many included documentation of their own incidents. One letter stood out. It was from a young black woman named Sienna Cole, a recent MBA graduate. Mr. Reed, I was on a flight and experienced almost identical treatment to yours, but I didn't have your resources or platform. I just endured it and filed a complaint that went nowhere. Watching your live stream showed me that discrimination doesn't have to be accepted silently. I'm now working with the ACLU to document systematic bias in airline treatment. Thank you for showing that change is possible. Donovan added Sienna's letter to a growing file. Her case would become part of a larger class action lawsuit that would ultimately force industry-wide changes. The true measure of success wasn't just Atlantic Airways reforms. It was the ripple effect across an entire industry. The Department of Transportation announced new federal guidelines requiring airlines to track and publicly report discrimination complaints. The regulations were nicknamed the Atlantic Airways Rules after the incident that sparked them. Donovan received a call from Transportation Secretary Harold Quinn. Mr. Reed, your Atlantic Airways case provided the political momentum we needed to implement comprehensive anti-discrimination regulations. Major airlines have already adopted your recommended protocols voluntarily rather than wait for federal mandates. The Reed Foundation had expanded its focus to transportation equality funding, legal representation for passengers facing discrimination. They had supported dozens of cases across airlines, bus companies, and rideshare services. Donovan often reflected on the moment when Elise Harlan, first told him to move to the back of the plane. That single incident of discrimination had become a catalyst for systematic change, affecting millions of travelers. But the most satisfying outcome was personal. Donovan had flown Atlantic Airways Flight 447 again, the same route, the same aircraft type. The flight attendant, a young black man named Devin Hayes, had welcomed him aboard with genuine respect. "Mr. Reed, it's an honor to have you flying with us today. Is there anything I can do to make your flight more comfortable?" Donovan had looked around the first-class cabin and noticed the diversity of passengers, different races, clothing styles, all being treated with equal professionalism and respect. "Devin, you're already doing everything perfectly." That was the real victory, not the corporate policy changes, or the media attention, or the stock price recovery. It was the simple fact that the next passenger who looked like Donovan, or didn't look like him, would be treated with dignity. The transformation was complete. The system had changed. Donovan Reed stood at the podium of the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis, delivering the keynote address for their annual Transportation Equality Summit. The auditorium was packed with hundreds of attendees, airline executives, civil rights lawyers, government officials, and activists. But Donovan could see beyond the crowd, to the millions watching the live stream. "Change doesn't require violence," he told the audience. "It doesn't require lawsuits or protests or public shaming. It requires documentation, leverage, and systematic thinking." He clicked to his first slide, a graph showing discrimination complaints across all major airlines. Since the Atlantic Airways incident, airline discrimination complaints have dropped dramatically industry-wide. Not because discrimination disappeared overnight, but because airlines implemented systems to prevent it. The graph showed a dramatic decline. This is what happens when you change systems instead of just punishing individuals. The audience included Elise Harlan, the former flight attendant who had triggered the entire incident. After her termination from Atlantic Airways, she had undergone extensive bias training and now worked as a diversity consultant, helping other companies avoid the mistakes she had made. She raised her hand during the Q&A session. "Mr. Reed, I'm Elise Harlan. I was the flight attendant on Flight 447. A murmur went through the crowd. This was unexpected. "Elise," Donovan said warmly, "thank you for being here. I wanted to publicly apologize again, but more importantly, I wanted to thank you. Your response changed my life. I understand now how my unconscious biases hurt people. I've spent time learning to be better." The crowd erupted in applause. This was the real power of systematic change. It could transform perpetrators into advocates. "Elise, your courage in facing your mistakes and working to prevent others from making them is exactly what this movement needs." Donovan clicked to his final slide, a photo of Sienna Cole, the young woman who had written to him after her own discrimination experience. Sienna Cole used documentation and legal advocacy to win a landmark settlement against United Airlines. That settlement funded bias training for tens of thousands of airline employees across the industry. The audience stood and applauded as Sienna walked onto the stage. Sienna's case proved that you don't need to be a CEO or a major shareholder to create change. You just need to be willing to document injustice and demand accountability. Donovan looked directly into the live stream camera. These touching stories remind us that change happens when ordinary people refuse to accept discrimination as normal. When we document injustice systematically, when we demand accountability from institutions, when we use our economic power strategically. He paused, letting the words sink in. Every person watching this has experienced unfair treatment or witnessed it happening to others. Your stories matter. Your documentation matters. The live stream chat was flowing with personal experiences, commitments to action, and expressions of gratitude. If you've witnessed discrimination in transportation, document it, record it, report it, share your real-life stories, because these Black stories and life stories become the foundation for systematic change. Donovan concluded with a direct challenge. Don't just watch injustice happen. Don't just feel bad about it. Do something about it. Use the tools we've developed. Use the systems we've built. Help us create a world where everyone travels with dignity. The screen displayed the Transportation Equality Foundation's website and reporting tools. Share this video. Tell your friends about these resources. Subscribe to stay informed about our progress. Because together, we can ensure that what happened on Flight 447 was the last time, not just another time. The applause continued as the live stream viewer count soared. Change had become contagious.